Hey, this is Steve Bloom, and you are listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
You're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to GeekCast Radio Network episode 88, our continuing Star Wars series of top countdown. So far you have heard us count down our top 10 characters from the film franchise. You've heard our top 10 Star Wars film moments and our top 10 Star Wars film quotes or lines of dialogue, etc. Hopefully you've been listening to all those, and today we kind of have something a little bit different, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're not going to give you a top 10 list today, but instead we're going to give you two top 5 lists. And to help me out with that, I, of course, am OptimusSolo, and joining me is one and only Movie Revolt Dan. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. Happy to have you here on some of these Star Wars countdowns. Obviously, TFG and Mike and myself are on the first one. Fridley Cent and myself have been on the second and third one, and then my cousin Joe was on one of them as well. So a lot of different voices we're hearing from as far as the Star Wars universe and all that Star Wars content at GeekCast Radio goes. So definitely looking forward to this one. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to any of the other ones. It's been interesting. We've had some traditional things, we've had some more creative things as far as choices go, but I think we've done a pretty good job at least mentioning and talking about all 6 films in a roundabout way.
I did get a chance to listen to a couple, and I was surprised that the prequels got their love. So I was yeah.
That's what I was surprised, especially with like the dialogue and stuff like that. I was like, well, this is going to be basically all, the original trilogy. And then I was going through and I'm like, well, I kind of like that line and I like this line. And there was only one prequel that I didn't have any lines from. So I did my best to represent the films and kind of pick out stuff that wasn't super bad. I'm talking about super bad, not the film, but that's going to have something to do with one of our top 5. So we have 2 different top 5s planned for you tonight. First, we're going to go over our, I guess you'd call them Star Wars rules, or things that we don't want to see in Episode 7 or in the future installments of the Star Wars films that we're going to be getting here on a yearly basis. So we have our top 5 rules for that, and then we're going to flip it, and instead of talking about bad, we're going to end on a good note, and we're going to talk about 5 ideas for films, stories, TV series, something that we would like to be told in some fashion involving the Star Wars universe. So the stories that we most want to see in some way. So it should be interesting. It definitely leaves the door wide open for a lot of things to be discussed. So anything you want to preface before we get into our first list, or anything you want to say as far as your relationship with the Star Wars franchise?
Well, I guess for me, for the most part, I have mostly a relationship with the movies. I've had brief encounters with some of the, I've read a couple books and played a little bit of video games and read a few comics here and there, but when we get into some of the more ideas, we'll kind of get into that. But yeah, mostly my knowledge of Star Wars comes from the film. I'm not like, I was listening to the episode, I think I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as in Star Wars as some people. Like I don't know what names of all the different ships and planets by heart nearly as much as I should. So hopefully I don't embarrass you in this podcast.
No, not at all. I definitely have my strengths and my weaknesses. I am not nearly as up on my Star Wars knowledge as I was once upon a time. I think my high school days were probably where it peaked. My girlfriend actually Amanda got me a Star Wars trivia type of game for my birthday called, they have them in different, they have a Disney one, they have a Star Wars one, I think it's called Pictopia. And it's basically trivia based on, you get a card with 4 pictures on it, and then the questions are related to those pictures. And every time a card comes up with 4 ships on it, I know I'm in trouble, because that's the knowledge that I've lost the most. I'm like, I don't even know the name of that ship, so give me 4 planets and I'll have a better shot.
It's easier when they're named after the shape of the actual ship. I'm like, that one I can get, but yeah. The
Rebel ships, yeah, X-Wings, Y-Wings, A-Wings, I get those, but when you put all these other destroyers and stuff on,
I used to know them better when I played the video games, because I would be, I'd actually be playing.
True.
I haven't played them in such a long time, so.
then every time it comes up with 4 characters, I know I'm good to go. I'm like, okay, I know everything about those characters, no problem. All right, so we were going to start with the rules. I think this should be fun. I have a couple written down that aren't going to make my top 5. We'll see if you have something similar to them or not, but I do have an honorable mention if we need be. But I'll start off with my number 5 rule for moving forward for whoever's in charge of Star Wars films, or kind of looking forward to next week, something I hope we don't see. And it's called I'm calling it the Know Your Source rule. And basically what I'm saying is, please don't directly contradict things from episode 4, 5, and 6.
I think that's a fair request to make. It's like,
I mean, it seems like it's a rule that's so many times broken in Hollywood in all different franchises, but it seems like it's such a simple one. Like, I'm making a film, either prequel, sequel, whatever you want to say, sidequel of something else. Like, it would seem like you would have somebody on board, like, fact-checking, or, like, checking to make sure you're not completely going against lines or different characters or whatnot. And, hey, they failed to follow this rule in a couple of the prequels, so I'm hoping in these additional movies they can at least... And notice I said don't directly contradict things from episode 4, 5, and 6. I'm a little more lenient if you contradict things from episodes 1, 2, and 3, I guess.
Yeah,
but
you don't actually say something like, Chewbacca was really just an overgrown Ewok this entire time. It's like,
right.
Yeah.
It was interesting this recent month here when we were catching up and watching all 6 of them somewhat in a row. I mean, there was days or weeks in between a couple of them, but relatively close together. And it's like you see some of especially like the scene with Leia describing her relationship with her mom or what she remembers to Luke, and it's just like, really? Like, we didn't see this scene when we were making the prequels. Like, she doesn't remember anything about her mom.
Or there's one meme that goes around where it's Obi-Wan giving Luke his father's lightsaber, and it's like, here's your father's lightsaber. He killed 30 kids with it. It's like, why would you give him the lightsaber?
He told me that you should have this when you grow up.
Yeah.
I don't think that's quite how it went down there, Obi-Wan. But yes,
you're a liar. But yeah, I think that's a good rule. Good rule. I kind of have something kind of related to that, and maybe we'll get to it.
Okay. So what's your number 5?
My number 5 is maybe kind of like the opposite of the way I think a lot of people are thinking. And I know with like everyone's typically their favorite Star Wars movie is Empire Strikes Back, and they talk about, it gets dark and how great that is. But my number 5 is don't go too dark, because at the end of the day, it's still a kids movie. And I feel like, especially with comic book movies, and we're seeing today, like, the push is to go super dark and super serious. And I think that should be an element of it for sure. But it should still, at the end of the day, be enjoyable. Should be still have that excitement that you get from the first film. And I don't want to see a Star Wars movie that's so depressing or so just demurring, like looking at like the Batman vs Superman trailer, where I don't think the sun shines at all in that entire movie. I still like, in order to make that darkness really matter, you need to have those light and funny moments. Obviously, there's ways to going too far with it, but having that balance, obviously, which is what Star Wars is all about, really.
You don't want to have a bunch of families that take their little kids in there and then like be leaving the theater in silence.
Exactly. Don't make Dark Knight the version of Dark Knight. You gotta keep it PG, and not necessarily with language, but just make it. It's there's a way of doing it, and I think that's what made the first trilogy so great.
Because I think even with a film like Return of the Jedi, which I guess you could argue is the darkest of the 3 original ones. I mean, I guess some might make an argument for Empire Strikes Back, but you still have things like, Endor and Ewoks and R2-D2 and C-3PO that can lighten it up as much. I guess I would ask you one question then as kind of a follow-up to that. Do you feel like, regardless of how bad the prequels are and what level of badness they each are, do you feel like Episode 3 was too dark, or do you think that it kind of just went up to the edge of how dark it should get?
I think that was the best balance out of all of the films. I feel like the first 1 and 2 didn't do it enough. Like they were kind of the opposite end of the spectrum in a little bit. Where I think 3 kind of brought it back and made it seem like, okay, there is a limit here. There's some stakes, there's some danger. Where the first 2, I don't necessarily had that too much. And I think a lot of that too is just the use of CGI, with it being so, like, the oversaturation of the brightness and things like that. It just didn't have the same effect.
All right, I think that's a good one too. I think finding that right balance, because I think a lot of people are expecting this to be a little bit grittier, maybe a little bit more serious compared to. But I think that it might seem like that just because the last films we got were 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, and I think it's, like I said, I don't necessarily think it should be without that, but it just should be, there's a limit you should go to, and like. Right.
Yeah. It should still be accessible to the whole family and to All right, good one. For my next rule, I'm calling it this is terrible. Some of my names are terrible. I'm not your man rule. And that could go a lot of different ways. But basically what I'm saying here is, please don't get wrong who the main character of the film should be, or of a series of films should be, because I think that is something that was like where the prequels somewhat went wrong. And the reason I say that is because they made the prequels basically all about Anakin Skywalker, which I can see the argument for, but I think they could have avoided a lot of the pitfalls that happened throughout that trilogy if instead that trilogy would have been Obi-Wan Kenobi's story. And I think it would have allowed us to avoid some of the focuses on some of the Anakin parts that weren't necessarily, to me, as important or necessary. Like, I understand that we want to see what happens to Anakin and kind of his growth and what becomes of him, but we see a whole lot of evolution of Darth Vader in the original trilogy without those films ever being about Darth Vader. And I just think it would have been a better choice to have the original trilogy be about Obi-Wan Kenobi and kind of how he comes into contact with Anakin, and you can kind of get the Anakin progression kind of as kind of like a side effect of everything else that's happening. I'm doing a terrible job of elaborating why, but I still need to get the name of the YouTube video out there that describes, if you make the films about Obi-Wan Kenobi, how much better everything goes together in that trilogy, and the parts that you can take out and the parts that you can add. It just sounds like it would have made them much better films. That's just one example, but I know they're going to be throwing a whole bunch of different characters in here, new characters that we've never seen before. Obviously, we're going to get the reappearances of some of the classic characters like Han Solo, Chewbacca, Leia, Luke, etc. So I'm really hoping that they figure out who should be the focal point of the film, I guess is my point there. And I'm hoping it's not something where we have so many different characters and we're not sure who to give the time to or who to give the focus to. So I guess that's a roundabout way of just saying that I hope the focus is in the right part.
Yeah, and I could see, like, don't just go based upon what the name of the character. Like, it doesn't, just because it's Skywalker doesn't mean it has to be the main focus. And I think with Episode 1 it would make more sense because it's hard to root for a character that you know is going to be the most ruthless villain of all time, especially when he's a kid. It's kind of hard to kind of like, okay, this is a cute kid, but he's going to be like this awful human being. So how am I supposed to? I think that's where.
Whereas if you make it about Obi-Wan, then it's like you can see how he meets the child. You can see the struggles he goes through with Qui-Gon, and then taking on this new Padawan, and then how much it just adds a lot more that you could do from a character arc standpoint to see Obi-Wan's, from his beginning with Qui-Gon to his failings with Anakin. I just think it would have added a lot more.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And it would make I think it would have strengthened, it would have added more context, better context, I would say. So my number 4 kind of ties back into your first when I said, know your source material. My part of it is kind of like my fourth rule is kind of stand on your own. And what that is, I mean, don't necessarily rely so much on the past and what came before. And this isn't necessarily just with the episodes, but a lot with the standalone movies they're talking about, like Rogue One and things like that. We don't necessarily, there's so much going on in the world of Star Wars, and we'll get to that with the second part of this. You don't need to do like Han Solo origin story or kind of just touch upon characters we already know, because there's so many great characters that you could either create or go after. Plus, I think what's great about Star Wars and why it's lasted so long is that it created a universe and created all these different pieces of it that people have kind of imagined. Looking at like the Rogue One story, like there's been so many different adaptations or thoughts on what that process could be, because all these questions are left open enough so people can hypothesize like what happened. But when you start answering all those questions, you start like closing that ability to imagine what the world can be, and we're kind of just given the answers. Right. So I think it'd be better if we got it instead of trying to just repeat what happened, it started forging its own destiny in that way.
And I think you touch on something that is kind of part of the magic of the Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, and kind of the whole film franchise, or the whole franchise in general. You could ask someone, just take episode 4, 5, and 6, for example, have people watch those, and then take a poll of who everybody's favorite character is. You're going to get a dozen different answers. For the most part, I mean, there's going to be people that feel a connection or like a whole bunch of different characters. It's not like your standard movie where you're told that this is the character you should like, and this is what the whole movie's about, and this is the person that, does good things. You have a whole bunch of both good and bad and in between that a lot of different people are going to resonate with. Their characters are going to resonate with different people. And I think that kind of adds to the fact that you don't have to necessarily, like you said, wrap up every single answer or tell us every single origin story of every single character or what happens to every single character. Like, you can do something that stands on its own because people are going to be interested in that just as much as they are interested in maybe the main characters of a trilogy or of a certain storyline.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I like that one. My third rule kind of a little bit goes back to what you were talking about with how dark and how gritty we can go or not go. And basically, I guess I'll call this the kids aren't stupid rule. And what I'm saying by this is, obviously this is a franchise, like you said, that when you boil it down, is still a kid's film. It's still something that should resonate with an entire family, regardless of how many adults and stuff love it. It's supposed to resonate to all ages. And I think too many times when people try to make something a quote-unquote kids movie, they dumb it down to a point where they actually start insulting the intelligence of the children watching it.
You mean like Jar Jar Binks?
Yes. And I think the biggest culprit of that is when the filmmakers decide what kind of comedy they put in or how they treat that. Because obviously kids are going to laugh at things, and kids like to laugh at things. But my rule here is, please, in any of these films, do not add a character for the sole purpose of comedy relief. Because I just don't think it's necessary. You can have comedy in all of these films without having someone that strictly is only there for comedy. I don't want a pointless character. If you think of the original trilogy, as much as you could say maybe R2-D2 and C-3PO are comic relief characters, they're also important pieces of the puzzle as far as tying things together and progressing the plot. And you can still get, even if you take their parts out of it, there's enough comedy in there that kids would still laugh at, that comes from characters that aren't strictly for that. Whether it's Han Solo making jokes, whether it's Chewbacca doing Chewbacca things, whether it's what you see with the Ewoks, whether it's what you see with the different creatures in Jabba's palace. You get humor all over the place, whether it's one-liners or whether it's just little things that they do, and I'm not talking about anything that was edited in the special edition versions. So I just don't, I feel like that's all Jar Jar Binks was. And I know that's the easy target, but as much as you might try to make the argument that he helps progress the plot because of the different diplomatic or functions like that, that could have been done in a dozen ways without him.
Yeah. There's never a moment to take him seriously, or it's just, it's just too goofy. It's just...
Yeah. And if there's a character that you could take out and the film isn't affected that much, or could easily go to, character B or character C could say that line or do that thing, then it just bugs me. So, I just don't want them to have something that is purely in there as comedy relief.
Plus, it's just being out of place, because I think about, like, a character like C-3PO or something like that. Like, he works well. Like, he's obviously there for comic relief in some way, but he's functional in different ways, and he works well within that group. Like, a character, again, like Jar Jar is an easier example, but it just doesn't fit with anything. Like, even, like, his interaction with the characters, it just always never worked. It was just, they almost would be, like his goofiness just didn't seem like to affect him in any way. It just, I don't know. It's just, it's bad. And
don't give us another Jar Jar Binks. Basically, I guess I could have called that the rule. Yeah. No more Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah. My number 3 rule is with actually, I think, a rule they've actually handled pretty well, even in the prequels, and for the most part. And it's casting. It's cast based on talent, not based on name. And I think Star Wars is the type, if you're making these movies, stay away from big name actors for the most part. I know there's been some exceptions, but I think Star Wars is best when the franchise is the biggest thing within the film. I mean, there's not many actors that you could say would be bigger than Star Wars, but Harrison Ford's an exception, but getting those young actors that are on the precipice of becoming big, or those veteran actors, not necessarily like a Brad Pitt or, like a Tom Cruise. Not that they would do that, but if you're making as many movies as they plan on making, you could run into that where you're casting people that are really just huge stars just to add into the box office. And I think like Episode 7 is a great example of how to do it. Like an Oscar Isaac, for example, is, I think, for you and me and a lot of like cinephiles or whatever you want to call them, they know Oscar Isaac from a lot of different things, but he's, for the most part, many people don't know who he is, and he's also a really great actor. And I mean, like, maybe the one exception would be Samuel L. Jackson.
I was thinking that was probably the closest they came to breaking that rule.
Yeah, he's probably the biggest, the one exception. And I don't know, he was, I think, fine enough, but I think that's when you're playing it. But Samuel L. Jackson's also in every movie ever, so he's just going to get kind of used to it. He's got to be in Star Wars eventually, I guess, by rule. But yeah, that'd be my one thing. Don't get away from that, because I think... Go ahead.
No, I agree with you, and I think the exception with, or the kind of the caveat with Harrison Ford was when he was in the film originally, at that point, he wasn't as big, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of just something that we got used to, and it just seems like he fits in that world now because of that, regardless of how big he has been since then.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that helps with him, but I can totally see, like, if you put someone like Al Pacino or, De Niro or somebody like that in here, it's more so going to take you out of the movie for a second. Or
even someone like a Simon Pegg, like, he's talked about being in it, but he's in Star Wars, but he's in a costume, so you don't know who he is. Even like, I think that's a smart thing to do. Just getting characters that don't get Tyler Perry to play a famous scientist in your movie, because that'd be weird. Who would do that?
Oh, I agree. That's a great rule. For my second rule, my number 2 here, I'm going to call it the time is precious rule. And what I mean by that is, please don't waste screen time that could otherwise be devoted to character development or character arcs or plot lines or stuff like that. Don't waste screen time with unnecessary and unimportant extended action sequences. I'm all for good action sequences, lightsaber duels that have some meaning behind it, battles, dogfighting, in space that actually, the battle means something. But I don't need another pod racing scene. I don't need a scene of that equivalent where you're spending a half hour of your movie time doing something that, in the end, isn't that important.
Yeah.
It was about buying some parts for a ship. We could have handled that in a bunch of different ways. I understand it's fun for the kids, and maybe that's where I'm kind of going against the whole family-friendly and enjoying...
family-friendly, not stupid. That's different.
Yeah, it's just, we can do stuff like that. Like, everybody enjoys action sequences, but there's so many ways to do them where they still mean something to the movie. So I don't want them wasting half hour of screen time on something that's not important to the plot.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, basically.
Exactly. That is probably George Lucas's biggest flaw.
Yeah, without a doubt. Nice. My number 2 is keep it timeless. And by that I mean, sometimes with films that take place in the future or in space or what have you, what you see often happen is the technology that starts getting used starts mirroring the technology we have of today. Look at it, any science fiction film. It looks like everything's touchscreen. They're almost like inverted iPads and things like that. The issue is that doesn't necessarily fit with the Star Wars universe, really. Like, looking at the technology that was in that world, you don't necessarily need to make it updated based upon the technology of today. Star Wars has what it is. It has that technology. You don't necessarily have to have them using something like Skype. They can use those weird video things that they always have used since we first saw Princess Leia try to call for help with Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
I think an example of a movie that does that wrong is actually with the Alien franchise or Prometheus, for example, which movie I like, but it's when you look at the technology that movie has compared to Alien or Aliens, it's like, okay, this is supposed to exist in a prequel to what's coming forward, but the technology is like light years ahead of what they have. And I think there's some, you can say, okay, well, that's a science ship and that's like a minor ship, so that's why. But still, it does kind of make the universe you're trying to build a little wonky. But also, I think it just makes it, what's great about Star Wars, it's that timeless quality. So if you start kind of making things kind of, even not just with technology, the lingo, the conversation, the way people talk, if it starts mirroring the way we talk, it's today, it could really ruin film down the line.
I agree. It can definitely date it in ways that it shouldn't be dated. I think something that Star Wars has always been, again, I think this is another aspect of why it's has such resonance with some people, or like magic, I guess you could say, is because for something at the same time to feel so much in the past, yet so much in the future, is just something that was just always cool for me about it. It's like they're way ahead of us in all this, space travel and spaceships and weapons and things like that. But at the same time, it also felt like it was way before us in, kind of the way they live and the kind of the civilization and the culture that they have, at least on certain planets in certain ways. I think they changed that a little bit when they got to the prequels by showing a few more civilized areas. Obviously, it's a different time period in the timeline and whatnot, but I always enjoyed the fact that it was like, this is supposed to be in the past, but it feels like it's in the future, and it's just like a cool balance between the two.
Yeah, it's like a dirty space where things are kind of not, it's grungy and dirty, and everything's kind of, it's like everyone has spaceships, yet you're still kind of poor, which is kind of
yeah, exactly. All right, for my number 1 rule for Episode 7 or any of the future films, I'm going to call it the Thou Shall Not Kill rule. And basically, all it boils down to, no, I'm not saying don't kill characters, but please don't immediately kill off the coolest character in your trilogy. I don't, and also don't do it in a way that is so anticlimactic that it just ruins everything that was cool about that character.
Yes.
We saw it with Boba Fett. We saw it with Darth Maul. Please don't do that again. I can't take another one like that. I don't want to have my favorite character in Episode 7 die in Episode 7. So, yeah, I just, it's just weird that they somehow did the exact same thing in the original, or in the prequel trilogy that they seem to have done in the original trilogy. I'm not saying Boba Fett's everybody's favorite character, much more a minor character, I guess, in the grand scheme of things than maybe Darth Maul could have been.
Yeah.
But both of them seem like they were gone as soon as you found out about them. So, yeah, that's just a personal bias, I guess. But don't kill off characters I love.
Any character in Episode 7 that you think has potential of being that, like the Darth Maul fan favorite from being right away?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like as many characters and action figures that I've seen on the shelves and stuff like that, that there's probably going to be some cool character that dies, but I just don't want it to be the coolest character in the movie.
Yeah, I'm curious what like the the character that steals the show. I think it's going to be. I can't think of it. It's the Silver Stormtrooper. I think it's played by.
Oh yeah.
Played by.
See, I don't want to say too much because outside of one trailer, I know nothing about what's coming.
Oh, okay.
So I wouldn't.
Well, that one was in the first trailer, I think. So.
Right. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I do know some of the characters, but I don't even know most of their names at this point because I've stayed so far away.
I don't know their name either. I just know there's a Silver Stormtrooper.
Yeah.
Or Platinum or whatever you want to call it. But cool.
There's a lot of cool looking characters. I know that much. So they definitely seem like they got the visual part of the characters right. So what's your number one role?
My number one, I guess you can call it the James Bond role or the overexposed role, and that's don't overexpose Star Wars. I don't want Empire Strikes Back to be to Star Wars what like GoldenEye or what Goldfinger is to James Bond, where it's like one movie in a string of 26 different movies. It's just to the point where it's like I can't even remember which one's which because there's just so many of them. Or you guess you could even say with superhero films. I don't want Star Wars to become its own genre, and I know Disney's saying they want a Star Wars movie every year, and part of me thinks that will be great, but part of me worries that then it makes Star Wars less special when you have so many things. I think there are other avenues you could go and explore with the Star Wars universe that we can get to, and I think there's a lot of great ideas. But that's my one worry is that they do too much too soon, and within the next 5 years we have like 7 Star Wars movies. So that's my biggest concern is don't ruin it in that way.
And it's a big concern because not only do you get the idea that it gets oversaturated and you get too much of it, but also if you're putting out that much stuff and you run that risk of if even half of those films are bad, how much does it, I don't know if you want to say really tarnish the name or tarnish the legacy or something like that. It seems like it's a little grand, but how much does it take away from how good or how well received Star Wars is in general, I guess is what I would say. I mean, obviously we had a trilogy that didn't resonate too well with just about anybody, and now everybody's super hyped again for Episode 7, and hopefully it lives up to at least, I mean, I don't think you can live up to the amount of hype that this film has, but hopefully, it at least delivers it as far as a quality film that people enjoy, and it's not, a repeat of Episode 1 or Episode 2, But how long, if it is that good, how long can you keep that up? You know what I mean? Like we kind of see that with Marvel a little bit. You're like, okay, this film's good. Second one that we get's good. Third one, you're like waiting for them to take a misstep. And if Star Wars puts out, like you said, 7 films in the next 5 years, and 4 of them are bad. Yeah,
or you run into the same issue with Marvel where it's like, you want to keep doing episodes 7, 8, and 9, but then what do you go after that? Do you want to give characters that go away? Do you want to try to repeat characters? I mean, I don't know. So
my hope is that, at least with the Star Wars universe, hopefully each film that they do can differentiate itself enough from the others. You know what I mean? Like you could have see what you can't do in the superhero film is you can keep doing Marvel or DC films. There's still always a superhero film.
Yeah.
And it seems like you could almost do a Star Wars film that's, you know what I mean? It's not a genre. It's a universe. So you could do, whatever, space fighting type of film. You could do a more dramatic type of film. You could do, you know what I mean? So hopefully that helps, but it all is going to depend on who's calling the shots.
I mean, you see superheroes trying to do that with like Marvel and Captain America's like a spy movie.
Right.
I mean, it's still at the end of the day still follows that Marvel formula, and I don't want there to be a Star Wars formula. Like, that's kind of my thing. It's like you said, make them different. Make Rogue One completely nothing like Episode 7. So
but hopefully that is something that they can pull off. So there are our rules for what not to do going forward. Hopefully someone important listens to this episode and takes note of these. If not, we'll be bitching about these things in a couple weeks or in a couple years or something like that. But we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be right back with our film ideas or story ideas, things we want to see in TV, film, or some type of format. So we'll be right back after the break.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan.
And we are Talking in Circles.
Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as GeekCast Radio's newest edition.
And, as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom.
We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions.
We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at GeekCastRadio.com.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. As I said before the break, we're going to be breaking down our top 5 ideas for stories we do want to be told. So we're talking a little bit about this right before the break of differentiating itself and all the different directions you can go and trying not to, make it so that there's a Star Wars formula. So how are we going to avoid the Star Wars formula? Dan, what's your number 5 idea for what you would like to see them do?
I'll preface this by saying that some of these are more of a joking manner than serious, but I think it could be kind of funny. And it starts with my number 5, and it's more of a comedic take. I mean, what can make Star Wars different if we just did have a straight comedy and maybe more of like a parody comedy? This could be maybe like an animated movie or something like that. But it's going to be called Jabba's Place, and it's going to be basically a Cheers kind of knockoff, but in Jabba's Palace.
I love that.
So it'll, you have Jabba, and he'll have his different on again and off again relationships with his different slaves, because that's how he rolls. And then, you have a lot of things going on. At the end of every episode, like with Kenny dying in South Park, you'll have someone dying in the Sarlacc pit. You'll have a range of characters. Everyone will know your name because you have a bounty on your head and people want to kill you. So I just think it'll be like a way to kind of give a variety of different characters every week. And at in the center of it is Jabba, and then you end up making him kind of like the norm of the podcast. I don't know. He's kind of the lovable goof who occasionally will kill people. I don't know. Because he's basically a mod boss. So.
I'm in trouble. Mine are not going to be nearly as good as yours. I have a feeling, but I want to see that. That would be absolutely awesome. I mean, who doesn't like all the different creatures that you get in Jabba's world? And just
not the one in the redone of Jedi, Return of the Jedi with I forget her name, or forget that one guy's name.
Yeah,
that one will be the first person to be killed in the Sarlacc pit.
Nice. You are the weakest link.
Exactly.
Sarlacc pit. All right. For my number 5, I'm going to call it the Council, not the counselor, the Council. And basically, the idea for me is to get a little bit of a more in-depth look, not specifically at the Jedi Council, but more so, and this isn't necessarily going to be an origin story, but more so revolving around Qui-Gon Jinn and the events that led to him not ever being on the Jedi Council. So, obviously, he had a way that was a little bit more rogue, I guess, than the rest of the Jedi, or he had actions that, or protocol that he wasn't willing to follow to allow himself to be on that. So I just want to see a little bit more about what that is. It's not necessarily, I don't need to see his story from birth. I don't want to see, his upbringing, but maybe, from the time that he was introduced to the Jedi to kind of where he gets to when we pick up on episode 1, and kind of what, does he have some run-ins with other members of the Jedi Council? Does it have something to do with different apprentices that he has, or his apprentice, or how did it all work out that he was kind of the outsider amongst the Jedi?
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. I thought about doing something Jedi-related, but I forgot all about him not being on the council, so that'd be kind of cool. Again, plus more Liam Neeson, so there you go. Yeah,
another way to get... we didn't get a ton of Qui-Gon, so it's another way to see a little bit more of that.
For sure. All right. My number 4, I didn't know how to kind of say this, but I wanted a movie. What's really great about Star Wars are the number of different planets and stuff to go to, and how can you kind of do that in a kind of intriguing way? And why I think one of the best ways would be something like a chase film, but in the Star Wars universe. And it's kind of a dumb name, but I was thinking Star Wars No Escape. and it'd be a very like low stakes movie where basically just maybe mistaken identity, just a new character, so it doesn't have to be a well-known character, is being hunted by none other than why not Darth Maul, because we need more Darth Maul, and for whatever reason, and it's just him trying to escape that wrath of Darth Maul, going to world, trying to hide out what would give kind of a smorgasbord of the different worlds in Star Wars, some new ones, some ones we know, and just him trying to run away from that of the gripe of Darth Maul. And I think that'd be kind of fun just to see a movie that, Star Wars is always so, so much going on. It's like, this is the sake of the galaxy, and will just be about one guy or one lady trying to basically get freedom because this crazy dude with a double bladed lightsaber wants to kill him. So
I think that would be a much better way of getting a snapshot of all of the planets than what we did in the redone celebration scene where they it's like, here's a planet from the original or from the prequel trilogy, we're going to insert it into the celebration scene.
It would have been funnier if they went and just for a quick second, the one planet that got blown up by the Death Star. It's like, oh, too soon.
Like an empty shot of like Mustafar where Anakin burned, just like, but nobody's celebrating. All right, for my number 4, I'm going more with, I guess, what you would call, I'm thinking more of like an anthology series for my number 4, and it could be like the short films or something like that all put together. And I'm just going to call this one, I guess it's a classic route because this is an easy one to pick, but I'm just going to call it The Bounty Hunters. And I don't want to necessarily completely focus on, like Boba Fett or Jango Fett or something like that, but just a series of short films about different bounty hunters. Because, you get that scene in the original trilogy where, Darth Vader has assembled, the best bounty hunters in the galaxy, so to speak. But we really get nothing about any of them outside of a little bit of Boba Fett, and I guess in some, in the cartoon, maybe a little bit more of some of the other ones. But you could pick those. You could pick some other random ones, but just kind of some little bits and pieces of maybe an IG-88 or Bosk or, Boba Fett or whoever it might be, and just kind of what part bounty hunting had to do with in the Star Wars universe, and almost maybe more with like a little bit of a Western type of spin. Yeah, so I mean, I just think it would be like fun, like a little Wild West anthology series, but with bounty hunters as kind of the main roles.
Nice, yeah, and I think a lot of those like bounty hunters have a lot of great potential in the kind of cool characters, so that would be great. So, and
I think you get like a different director to do each one.
Yeah.
Like, that would be perfect for, like, the Quentin Tarantino version of how he gets involved with the Star Wars universe. Like, one of him, just all different styles completely.
Cool. And I love anthology movies, so we want to see them again. All right. Well, my next one is, like I said, I've had a little exposure to a couple of the books. This is one of the books that I read that I think would actually, I know Disney said they did away with all the canon or whatever, I don't know what you call it, where they're kind of starting over where all the other books didn't happen.
This counts, that doesn't count, all that type of stuff. Yeah.
So, but I think this is kind of a cool story. It's the Bane trilogy, and I would call it Rise of the Sith. The reason being, this character Bane, not Bane from the Batman, but you maybe would need to change the character. His name is actually really stupid. The reason they call him Bane because his dad said he was a bane of his existence, so he took the name, which is kind of dumb. But it's interesting itself because he's the guy who kind of started or revitalized the idea of the Sith, where you have the Sith Lord and then the person underneath him, where there are only two, and like the Darth character. And he's like one of the most powerful characters of all time, and just his journey, it's cool kind of seeing a story that's based upon a villain, which is kind of, you don't see that very often, and he's a very interesting character in that reign where he kind of comes from this dorky kid who's kind of abused to this powerful character. So I think there's a lot of potential there. So I would love to see that story and kind of see the Sith way of life, which you kind of get glimpses of here and there, but kind of just seeing how they kind of mold the Sith into kind of being who they are. So it'd be like the opposite of episode 2, 1, 2, and 3, where we saw the Jedi Council. This would be seeing like the Sith Council and how it came up and how it was destroyed.
But I have one that's very similar, and I think it's a similar thought process. That's why I picked that. So I'm down with that. And Bane is definitely one of the more, I think, like, one of those characters that even people that haven't read a lot of the books kind of know of his existence if you're, like, a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
So I think that would work really well. I'm going a completely different direction with my number 3, and I'm going to call it Honor Among Thieves. Is that already the name of a movie? I feel like it
Probably.
is. But whatever.
You just
we can
put Star Wars in front of it, so you're okay.
Star Wars Honor Among Thieves. This is going to be like a buddy cop movie.
Nice.
And I don't really need to see the origin again. I'm not for every spin-off film being an origin story. But let's see a little bit of some of the characters that we love. I don't know who would play them nowadays, but what I'm thinking is a buddy cop movie based on Han Solo and Lando Calrissian.
That would be pretty awesome.
Early on, obviously way before the original trilogy, there was obviously an interaction, and Han and Lando knew each other, and they were both seemed like they're similar characteristics as far as, that's where I get like the Honor Among Thieves, because it seems like they are people that would always, try to find a way to one-up somebody or to get the upper hand or to kind of politely or in a non-douchebag way steal or Robin Hood type style. And it could even involve some backstory with the Millennium Falcon and how they came into own that, and how it exchanges hands, and maybe how they meet Chewie. I don't know, but just some type of fun comedy involving Han and Lando as they just be themselves and go around the galaxy being Han and Lando.
Yeah, I'd just love to see more interaction with them, so that'd be cool. Especially now that Harrison Ford's even older and grumpier, but yeah.
Grumpy old man.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. My next one's kind of a comedy too. A different type of comedy though. My Jabba's Palace was kind of a spin-off of, or kind of a spoof of the different Cheers, and my next one would be kind of a spoof of the college comedies, but it would be Jedi Academy, kind of like the old 80s college comedies of the Revenge of the Nerds, Animal House, that type of stuff, but they're Jedi. So imagine the type of practical jokes and things, and like with Yoda being the dean of the college, all the craziness that could ensue with that going on. So I think, you have a lot of potential there. There was like a cartoon show that was with, like, it had all the different historical figures were in college or high school. It'd be kind of the same thing, where just different Jedi and stuff like that. They're just in high school trying to learn the ways of the Force while still trying to get laid and go to the next kegger. So
it's like if you combine Revenge of the Nerds and all those movies with like X-Men somehow, like where you have like the Professor Xavier and all the different classes, but these guys all have like crazy powers and whatnot. So
exactly, it would make the the climactic basketball scene at the end so much more interesting.
Nice. I'd be down for that. That seems like it would be a lot of fun, and you could definitely get some actors involved in the Star Wars universe that you might not otherwise be able to do.
Like Jonah Hill and imagine Jonah and what's his name, Michael Cera. It'd be like Superbad, but Jedi.
Nice. My number 2 is going to be similar to the one that you were talking about before, as we kind of get involved with the Sith a little bit more, and I'm going to call this one Master and Apprentice. And I'm specifically talking about something that is mentioned in the prequel trilogy when Palpatine is talking to Anakin. And I basically want to go back and explore a little bit more about the journey that Palpatine had with his master at one point. And, he kind of talks about how he was able to develop skills that nobody else had before, and then obviously how eventually he turned on his own master and kind of took over, etc. So I think it would be fun to kind of see how that all went down. Like, let's see Palpatine, his journey through the Sith ranks, I guess, however you want to call it, to where he gets to the point that he's ready to be in charge and take on his own apprentice. So just kind of something that tells a little bit more. I think it was Darth Plagueis or something like that, and his interaction with him, just to get more, like you said, on your other one, get more in-depth or insight into how the Sith work, kind of like we do with the Jedi in the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too. And you could probably, seeing kind of where that all came from would be kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean it's maybe not as fun as some of the other ones, but I just think from like a story standpoint, it would be kind of interesting. Maybe not for the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe this is the horror version of.
I'd actually try to think of a horror film. There's actually this book, I forget the name of it, but it's like stormtroopers that turn into zombies, but I figure we're kind of zombied out by this point. So,
well, there is that one character that shows up in the cantina that literally is Lucifer, I think.
Yeah.
Horns coming out of his head, and I'm like, what is this guy?
They didn't have much money. They kind of just went to different sets and picked out characters.
He's clearly from a different movie.
Yeah.
You clearly got somebody from a horror movie down the block. That isn't scene.
That actually would be kind of smart, though. Like, okay, we don't have money. Let's just go see who's currently in costume, and then put them in the bar.
Bring them on. We just need crazy people that don't look like humans.
Exactly. My last one, I had one that was based upon a book. My last one's based upon my all-time probably favorite video game when it comes to Star Wars, and just when I talked about forging your own ground, not relying on things of the past or characters we already know. If you did this story, you would kind of have to do that, and it's the Knights of the Old Republic, which talks about Star Wars like thousands of years before the settings of the prequel trilogy and things like that. Weirdly, the technology is basically the same, but hey, what are you going to do? But I just, you don't necessarily have to follow the story of the Knights of the Old Republic, the first game, which I think is a fantastic story, but just I would love to see that world portrayed, knowing that it'd be completely different. It would see things in a different manner. A lot of planets that haven't even been founded yet, so it puts you in a completely new perspective when it comes to Star Wars. So that would be a movie I'd love to see happen.
And I think the bonus there is that you'd have a lot of people that are interested in that because of their experience with the game and whatnot. So you'd already have like a fan base that's ready for that story to be told.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think a lot of people would like that. For my number one, again, this is more just of a personal bias choice. I don't, maybe not necessarily make as fun or as good of films as some of these other ones, but for me, it's the one thing that is within the timeline, I guess, of the original or of the 6 films in the timeline of the film franchise that I've always wanted to see more of, and I've always wanted to kind of see this story, and I'm going to call it exactly what it's called in the timeline, which is the Great Jedi Purge. And what I'm talking about is that time in between Episode 3 and Episode 4. So you have Episode 3 where most of the Jedi are killed, where Yoda and Obi-Wan go into hiding, and we have kind of that structure laid. And then by the time you get to Episode 4, there really aren't any Jedi left. There's Yoda and Obi-Wan who are still in hiding, and then there's obviously Luke and Leia. There were more than Obi-Wan and Yoda that survived that initial Order 66. There was a few dozen or so that got the message and stayed away and survived. So I think it would be cool on a couple different fronts. So if we don't get the bounty hunter anthology film, maybe it would be a way to work in some of those bounty hunters as they're hired to track down and kill the remaining Jedi. Maybe you take it another route and get to see Darth Vader actually being a badass, which we really never get to see in the 6 films. I mean, outside of, you get his older self with his force choke and that type of thing, which is still a badass. And we get like what leads up to him being it, but we never kind of get him in his prime. So you might be able to get to see some of that. But I think where is the most intriguing for me is going away from the characters that we know and focusing more on some of those Jedi that we've never seen, we've never heard of, we've never got to know them. And people that weren't like just the Jedi Council members, but more like, I guess, Qui-Gon in a way, like other Jedi that are like just out there that were doing other things that weren't by any clones at the time, that type of thing. There's a cool story specifically about one of them, and I'm not going to be able to pull his name off the top of my head, but there was a pretty cool story of someone who was in a different area, did not succumb to the Order 66, and he kind of took it as his mission to try to confront Darth Vader. Like, his mission in life was to take out Darth Vader, because he figured if he did that, then maybe there would be some hope for the Jedi. He really never gets to that. He gets to dealing with one of Darth Vader's apprentices, has a battle with him which he doesn't win, and it's an interesting story for him because he actually then kind of goes spiraling into kind of gives up on his goals and his battle as a Jedi, and he ends up residing in Cloud City and being a drunk for a while and just kind of wallowing in the fact that he failed at what his mission was, and then eventually he gets talked into being back involved with it and ongoing. But obviously it wouldn't end well for most of them because they do all eventually die. But I just think it would be fun to see who those characters were and kind of the hunt of whoever it was, the Sith, the bounty hunters, whoever it is that's trying to track them down.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of corresponds with my chase film. You can kind of combine that, the bounty hunters, and what we're saying is that's the movie to go with because that kind of combines a lot of the different ideas, for sure. That'd be really cool. I think it. I always find that I think of all the prequel moments, that might be one of my favorite. It's a weird word to say, but just seeing the most impactful of all the different moments in the Star Wars, just seeing all those Jedi fall. But yeah, there's certainly more things to go. Plus, I really like the Jedi. I like to see more.
And there's some cool stories. It seems like based on, I guess, what's been written in some of the books and whatnot, there was those that kind of went into hiding like Obi-Wan or Yoda, and then there was those that completely kind of disavowed or acted like they were never part of, threw away their lightsabers and said, I'm not part of them anymore, and I want to go live my own life. And then there was those that tried to keep on the fight and tried to, stick with it. So I think that it'd be interesting to see kind of a little bit of all of those and kind of how it all went down to the point where they all are either not Jedi anymore or killed or whatever. So
yeah, there's a comic Marvel has right now. It's like The Last Padawan that follows one of them. I can't think of his name, but yeah, and then I think that Star Wars Rebels as well. It's a cartoon series that I think has
kind of doing a little bit of that.
Yeah, not necessarily to that extent though.
Right. So I think there's a bunch of good ideas for the powers that be at Disney to take and run with. You don't even need to give us credit for it. Just go ahead and make these films, and we'll be happy to watch them.
But if you want to give us credit in the royalties that Lucas has, we would not be against it.
Exactly. I forgot to mention before when we were talking about our rules that my honorable mention rule was the George Lucas rule, which is don't let George Lucas anywhere near any of these films. Does that mean?
Yeah, not anymore. He can watch them, but yeah, definitely.
His comments that he's been making over the last couple months have just not done much.
Only thing I saw was that he saw Episode 7 and said it was good. That's the only thing I saw.
Yeah.
Which just doesn't mean much to me, but yeah.
Right. I also had an honorable mention for our ideas, and I said I didn't really want to see too many origin stories, but just for fun, let's see the origin of Jango Fett, and let's just call it Django Unchained. So that was the only other one I could think of as just a humorous thing. But I
thought I was thinking something like the Bounty Hunters thing as well, and like I said, like a horror film, even like a creature film, like with like a Rancor or something like.
Oh yeah,
like that would be kind of cool. Where
there could be like how you had like the Attack of the Blob or like the Thing or something like that. You could easily do like a Star Wars creature and just go off with that.
Definitely.
That'd be fun. So let us know what you think of our ideas, and feel free to post your own ideas as to what you would like to see on the episode post. We'd love to kind of hear what other people have to say and kind of react to what we think about that, because there's definitely a whole lot of ideas circulating out there, and apparently if they're going to make a film every year, eventually they're going to need us folks. They're going to need our ideas. So we'd look forward to that, as well as it's just another fun thing to do Star Wars related as we wait just over 100 hours that we have to wait more by the time this is released to when episode 7.
Are you in line right now as your podcast?
I am not.
Yeah.
If I didn't have a job, maybe I would be. Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. And like I said, if you haven't listened to the past episodes about the top characters and moments and lines, please go back and listen to those and let us know what your thoughts on those episodes are as well. Anything else you wanted to say as far as anything you didn't get to say honorable mention wise, or anything about the ideas or the rules?
No, I think if they follow these rules, they'll be set. I didn't really have any honorable mentions. I thought for the rules maybe something about regarding, you know, practical over CGI, but I feel like...
Oh, yeah, that would be a good one. Yeah.
I feel like they're kind of going down that route, and they've kind of, that one's already been kind of done to death, so, but I think it's a good rule to follow.
Well, we'll have to wait now and see. We'll have to have like a revisiting after either episode 7 or after the first couple spin-offs to see how many of our rules they've broken by that point. But
yeah.
hopefully not any of them. So, all right, I think that does it for this episode then. As always, you can stay in contact with all things GeekCast Radio by searching us out on Facebook, and that way you'll be up to date with every new release of every episode and all the different blogs and stuff that get posted there. The best way to interact with us as far as the actual episode is to go to the website, geekcastradio.com, find the episode post, and comment. We will definitely respond to those. I think we do a fairly decent job of trying to respond to everybody that does comment there. And then, obviously, on Twitter, you can follow all the different GeekCast Radio handles. You can also follow us individually. Dan, what is your Twitter?
I am at Movie Revolt.
And I am at OptimusSolo. And you'll have to stick with us because there might be at least 1 or 2 more Star Wars related things on various GeekCast Radio shows, including Cinema Geeks and right here at the GeekCast Radio Network flagship show. But until then, may the Force be with you.